Hello and welcome to the Fintech Finance Virtual Arena. I'm your host, Doug McKenzie. Today we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence in finance. I'm joined by two guests right at the heart of the story. We have Mike Gamble, the Director of Analysis and Design over at TSB Bank, and Ross Watts, the Chief Customer Officer over at Sandstone Technology. Guys, thank you so much for joining me here today on the Virtual Arena. How are you both doing, Ross? How are you doing? I think you're dialing in from somewhere quite far, right?
Yeah, over here in Sydney, Australia. I think I was just sharing with you earlier. We're having our coldest day of the year, so we've got down to a balmy 4 degrees here in the north of Sydney. So warming up for you for the call.
Amazing. Well, with that in mind then, Ross, could you give our audience a bit of a background to your role at Sandstone and Sandstone itself, please?
Yeah, sure. So Ross Watts, a Chief Customer Officer for Sandstone Technology. So I head up our sales, marketing and partnership functions, lead teams out of Sydney and Leeds in the UK. We serve customers in Australia, New Zealand, the UK and a smattering of clients in Asia. I guess from a Sandstone perspective, serving tier 1 to 4 financial institutions in 4 key areas. So digital banking, digital acquisition, predominantly onboarding, AI and ML, mainly in the intelligent document processing space, because what we're most famous for is LendFast, which is our home lending platform that processes about 20% of all home loans in Australia. So we've got a very strong market share, and Diva's a really, a great AI ML proposition to accompany that.
Interesting. So it's going to be exciting to hear that perspective on the lending side, because that's going to be so pivotal for financial institutions going into the future, and I think AI is going to play a big role in that. Now, also joining us, we have Mike Gamble, as I said, from TSB. How are you doing, Mike?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Doug.
Amazing.
Less glamorous Chelmsford and Essex, but much warmer than Australia by the sounds of it. We're about 25 degrees here, so yeah.
Exactly. You can't beat that. It sounds way better than 4 degrees. So, Mike, thank you also for joining us there in balmy Essex. So, I mean, with that in mind, then, could you give our audience a bit of background to yourself a bit more and your role at TSB too?
Yeah, so I work for TSB. We're a kind of a mid-sized UK high street bank. Circa 5 million customers, big branch network, telephony, but digital is where we're really kind of focusing at the moment. My role is I head up the analysis and design function. So essentially that means that all change within the bank will start with my team. We figure out what the best solution is for customers. We do a whole bunch of CX design, customer research. We talk to thousands of customers every year. And like I said, the aim really for our strategy is a lot of emphasis on digital and how we drive that forward, but not forgetting that we are a traditional high street branch, and the human element of banking is really key to us, and how we connect the digital world with the human world is absolutely front and center for us.
Yeah, and I think that's really hit a nail on the head that I hope that will come out in the conversation is finding that balance of artificial intelligence and still being human, and I think we might uncover that one does not mean the lack of the other, or something like that. Now, guys, thank you so much for that intro. Let's get stuck in. Now, I think it's fair to say that, Ross, if I come to you with this first, then AI is still considered science fiction by a lot of the people within the industry, and especially also out when it comes to AI and finance. But I think it's become the backbone of millions of businesses worldwide. I think that's been proven. But to kind of lay the backbone for the rest of the conversation, what is AI actually capable of currently in the financial market?
I guess, before we get onto the financial market, I guess, the reality with AI is it's become such an important part of our lives. And I think for many of us, we just don't realise how much of a role it plays. I think part of the challenge is there's so much mystery around AI that we don't focus on where it is making a difference in our everyday lives. And if you just think of, COVID, we've seen AI being used in airports to identify the disease. We've seen it used to track it, and we've also seen it used in the medical environment when it comes to tomography for identifying the disease in lungs. So we've seen AI become really important to everyday life. From a financial institution's perspective, Obviously for us, AI is integral to our home lending offering. So it's almost impossible to think of how much longer the home loan process may be for customers, for those people in processing centres, for the brokers that are referring loans, if you didn't have AI, intelligently sorting, managing those documents in terms of identifying the key phrases, putting them the right way round, making sure that the dates are correct and valid, and then sending out notifications to accelerate that process. So, for us, AI is pretty much integral in that home lending system. And then when we speak to our customers, whether it be from a risk or regulatory perspective, AI is helping them in so many ways meet the obligations that they have to the customers, the regulator, and also to their boards.
Yeah, and I think you've really hit, you've explored a number of different things there, and how critical it has been to people's health, but also their financial health, by being able to access their credit. And Mike, I'd like to hear your perspective of this, from within the design side of things and within the bank. Ross has mentioned the compliance side of things, but also being able to streamline systems as well. So what does that mean on the design side for you?
Yeah, well, from a TSB perspective, we see it as and we're learning fast. And when I say learning, we're working closely with two partners. So we work with a company called LivePerson that opens up our web chat, for a better word, but also IBM. So IBM Watson is at the heart of everything we do. And I think we're a company like TSB, we're experts in servicing customers and banking, but we recognise we can't be experts in everything when it comes to technology. So partnering up with IBM and LivePerson has been key. Where we see it being very, very beneficial, and as was mentioned there about COVID and the impact on that in the last kind of 18 months, we use it through what we call our TSB Smart Agent. So on our .co.uk service, and just recently within our mobile app, we've got a TSB Smart Agent that's available 24/7 for customers.
Nice.
We always talked about it being a service we wanted to offer within the mobile app, but we moved really quickly last year at the start of COVID. Literally, it's the fastest project I've ever worked on. We launched the project on a Thursday, went live the following Thursday. And we've seen over 1.2 million conversations since launching with our customers. So where we see AI being key to that is, we teach the bot some basic principles of how banking works and how to support our customers, and just keep building on it. We keep learning, we keep re-educating the bot, and we lovingly call it TSB Smart Agent. I'll refer to it as TSB Smart Agent, but like I said, it's there 24/7. I think we'll probably get into more detail later in the conversation, but I did mention human banking. For me, the biggest learning we've had is it cannot be just standalone AI. Our AI Watson brain within TSB Smart Agent it's very good at identifying when customers are in financial difficulty, as an example, or they're vulnerable. And where they are, we just flip them straight away from talking to a TSB Smart Agent and connect them real time to a human being. And we see that as the most powerful development of how we're learning how to use this channel and this technology going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really incredible, kind of looking at that kind of right at the heart of what the customer needs. And it's really, over the last year, it's been shown that they need, people need to have contact with their financial well-being and the people that operate that. So, if I could stick with you, Mike, for my next question, I'm really interested in seeing how retail, maybe small business banking has kind of changed over the last 5 years. And we can kind of move away from AI slightly to kind of get a holistic view of it. But in your opinion, what's been the biggest changes, and has AI had an impact on allowing those changes?
Yeah, well, when I think about the biggest changes to retail banking and our business population, it's probably easier to think about how the broader kind of our lives have changed. I see my own kids, they've all got mobile phones, but they never talk to anyone on their mobile phones. It's all interacting via their thumbs as opposed to talking. In fact, if any of my kids' phones ring, it's almost like panic. They're not sure what to do. So how people interact with each other and organisations has massively shifted. in the last few years. And what we're definitely seeing at TSB is customers are more inclined to do transactions themselves and want to come to speak to us when they're talking about that interaction. So it's one thing to, we see millions of transactions every day around paying bills, moving money. But when you want to speak to somebody about buying a home or restructuring your debt, or you're in financial difficulty or whatever, that's when the interaction part really comes. And I think what we've had to do in retail banking is move fast to catch up with that. So again, if I go back to TSB Smart Agent, the core principle of it is a big shift in thinking in retail banking. And what I mean by that is, if I think about our traditional telephony centres, we measure everything on how quick we answer the phone, how quick we resolve the customer's problem, the average handling time, and we see these numbers all the time. But when you talk about things like TSB Smart Agent, a customer might flip open their phone at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning and say to our TSB Smart Agent, "I've just bought a new home." The Smart Agent will pick up that conversation instantly and start interacting, but a customer might have actually just put their phone down and don't come back to it till 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. And they may not even get to the end of the transaction to a Thursday. Okay. But it works seamlessly. You could not do that with a human being, because you're not going to have a human being on hold for 4 days while we're sorting a customer's query. But also it's about making sure that the brain that sits behind it, I talked about IBM Watson, it's forever evolving, and we're learning really fast. I mean, we get the analytics out every day, and we're tweaking it every day just to know better for our customers. And one of the favourite things I've noticed recently is our TSB Smart Agent can help a customer change their address, for example. And even just the way in which a customer starts a conversation is just massive. And we have a lot of customers in Scotland, and we hear customers in Scotland saying, "I'm flitting. I never knew that meant I'm moving home," but our TSB Smart Agent recognises that and will immediately help the customer move, record their new address. So we're forever learning on that kind of AI engine.
That's incredible, because not a lot of Scots can understand some level of Scots. So it's brilliant that artificial intelligence can kind of become that human partner 24/7 now. I think if we were to glean from that, something that's very important that's changed in retail and business banking has been that contact. And if I could come to you then, Ross, and seeing Mike's kind of laid down how AI has played a role in that, but how has AI enabled huge international banks with legacy systems to kind of operate at the same speeds that Mike's been talking about, and offer up the same services that customers need nowadays?
Yeah, I think it's been a really interesting journey. I think Mike's analysis of where TSB are on the AI journey is very similar to that which we hear from many of our clients. I think the journey that large organizations are on is that they're really working out where they can extract the benefits from AI and where that's going to make the biggest difference to them. I've already talked about how that from an Australian perspective, how that's become integral in the credit underwriting element. So from a back office operation perspective, it's become integral in driving efficiency, making sure that they can manage the headcount within operating centres really easily. I guess when we look at things like KYC and AML, I don't know if you've seen the news from Australia over in the UK, but we've had some of our banks have had some challenges, and there's been some significant fines handed out where processes have not been followed, and billions of dollars have been sent to operations overseas in Asia which weren't tracked with appropriate governance. And a lot of the failings that have been established there was that appropriate technology could have established these risks. And I think what you're seeing with some of this news that's in the system in Australia is that people are looking to AI more and more now to solve for those issues. It's recognised that it's almost impossible to handle the amount of data that is going through legacy systems from a transactional perspective, using anything other than an AI-based solution. So, that's certainly something which has been brought to the fore by the fines received by couple of the major financial institutions over here. But I'd be interested to hear from Mike's perspective how AI is benefiting the majors over in the UK.
Yeah, look, it's fraud and money laundering, and is always. I mean, we're in a unique position at TSB when I think about fraud, that we are the only UK bank that has a fraud guarantee that we offer to our customers.
Nice.
So regardless of how the customer is impacted by fraud, as long as they're an innocent victim, even if they've been scammed into clicking on a link that wasn't legit, or they've their account's been taken over, we have a zero quibble policy, and we 100% pay back. Now, what that does mean is we pedal really hard to help the customers to avoid being victim of frauds in the first place. So that is an area that we've done a whole ton of work on analytics behind the scene, but we're now moving into how can, again, TSB Smart Agent being my favorite friend, is how can the TSB Smart Agent help the customer at that in real time. And I think where it becomes interesting is if we look internally for TSB, I talked about we've got 5 million customers. We've got close to 70% of our customers are digitally engaged, and circa 90% of all of our transactions are done by customers themselves. Now, most of those customers are using our mobile channel. So if a customer does see a transaction that doesn't look quite right, that's where they're going to see it, within the mobile channel. And for me, the trick here is, how do we connect the customer's digital world when they first find the problem to the correct channel to actually solve the problem and to raise the concern that it could be fraud. So I don't want customers to see something in the mobile app and then have to log off their mobile app, look up a phone number, ring a phone number, give out, put in an ID, explain to a human being what the problem is. So we're building within our mobile app the ability that not only do you see a smarter details of what the transaction is, but if it doesn't look quite right, we connect you straight to the Smart Agent that will guide you through. If it's innocent, and we'll sort it. If it's dispute, we'll sort it. If it's fraud, we're connecting to the right people. So I think that's where I see the benefits more. I spend most of my time talking about customer experience. That's what I'm passionate about. And I think having AI and Smart Agent and a good mobile app and connecting that ecosystem is just the way forward for me. And even just as another example, working with a company like LivePerson, they're challenging our way of thinking. So I give an example of something we're playing with at the moment, that if a customer rings into telephony, we can identify they've rung via a mobile, and if they're a digital customer. And the Smart Agent, what we want to be able to do is to pipe up and say, hi, Doug, it's TSB Smart Agent here. I can see you're queuing to speak to somebody, I can help you. And we transfer the call to Smart Agent on the same device. Now, the customer doesn't have to then carry on and wait to speak to a human, but it's that connecting the physical, the virtual, the AI world all together so it's seamless to the customer is kind of where we're thinking.
That's an incredible omni-channel platform to be able to actually reach into the customer and say, hey, look, almost having an artificial intelligence officer come in and talk to someone immediately. I love hearing that. That's absolutely incredible. And it kind of, it leads me on to my next question, which was going to be creating a slick customer experience and how AI can be at the heart of that before we kind of go back into the operations side with you, Ross. But, Mike, if we could continue that, you've kind of already laid down some incredible kind of positions there. And is there anything else that AI might be looking at in the future and be critical for that customer experience and engagement? Yeah,
I think number one priority for me is it's got to be relevant, useful, not creepy. So what the last thing we'd be doing,
uncanny valley.
Every 10 minutes trying to convince the customer what they should be doing and what they shouldn't be doing. So I can't ever see a time when when all this is over and a customer walks in to buy their 5th coffee of the day of TSB Smart Agent saying, you can't really afford that coffee. Why don't you go back to the office and put the kettle on? It won't be that type of creepy. But where I really see it coming to their own, so if you think about, again, the mobile app, we're all, everyone's using mobile technology for all sorts of instances, where it's ordering your takeaway on a Friday night, to checking the football scores, to doing your banking. But there is always a risk that you overpopulate and overcomplicate a mobile app. And our mobile app, we're focusing on almost 2 parts to it. Part one is the stuff you do every day is going to be almost like the native build of the app. So you want to pay bills, move money, check your balance. pretty much anything else beyond that, we're going to use TSB Smart Agent with the AI engine behind it to be almost like that real-time concierge and your personal assistant to help you. Now, the reason why we think that's the right way to go is, if you imagine, if I break down the different customer journeys within a normal retail bank, there's probably around about 100 journeys. So a journey could be, I want to pay a bill, I want to report a fraud, I want to change my address, I want to change my name. But for the vast majority of those journeys, you'll probably only do 10% on a regular basis.
Yeah. So
the journeys you do infrequently, if the way we position that with our customers is through TSB Smart Agent underpinned by AI, then what happens is customers get used to that as another way of interacting with the bank for the 90% they do infrequently. So you may not move, you may only move once every 10 years. You may only change your name once in a lifetime. You may only, luckily, be hit by fraud once in a lifetime. But if all of those transactions and interactions are through TSB Smart Agent underpinned by AI, it just gives us that familiarity that the customer doesn't have to retrain themselves to use all these different aspects.
Yeah.
The other bit for me as well is within the Watson brain within Smart Agent is we can consider all the different permutations and combinations. So even at the highest level, a customer says, if the customer tells us they've just got married. Now, if I walk into a branch and speak to one of our really skilled partners and says, I've just got married, the partner will think straight away, okay, that we may well be doing a name change here, it could be change of address, it may be additional banking needs, but doing it through a native app of saying, I want to change my address, is very functional. What we can do in AI is really kind of embellish and enrich that conversation and say, okay, you got married, congratulations for a start. Right, how can I help you? Are you looking to change your name? I can also change your address. And you have that conversation with technology that almost, very similar to that human interaction.
Incredible. Now, that would be quite expensive to have to be able to offer that 24/7 with a real human. So Ross, I'm also really interested, because at the end of the day, a bank is trying to mitigate risk, obviously trying to make sure that things aren't getting crazy. So how can AI then enable these services that Mike has been talking about and really cut down costs for the bank on the operations side, but also on the future side? I think Westpac, as you mentioned in your previous one, was fined, what was it, 1.3 billion Aussie dollars?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So look, I think when we're talking with our clients, we're often talking about how do we improve their cost to income ratio. So the conversation is less about how do we just cut costs, but also, how do they save to invest? And with every major bank looking to invest more in their technology, they've got to obviously find efficiencies that are going to enable them to do that. So for us, much of the conversation is about how do you remove low value manual handling processes out of the system? How do you make sure you can speed up the capture of information that's going to provide insights for the business to make decisions more efficiently and with more accuracy? And I think AI plays a really important role in that, in addition to the areas where Mike has talked about, which are customer facing, where you can obviously use an AI interface to support your customers. So for me, as I mentioned earlier, home lending is the space where we really kind of specialize from an AI perspective, and the efficiencies here are numerous within the home lending process. We see not only are we able to speed up the time per application in terms of the days to approval, we're also able to increase the number of applications that are handled, reduce the amount of rework, reduce the amount of errors. And what you get as a result of that, when you think about cost to income, is you've got a happier customer at the end of the process. You've got a happier introducer. 80% of the market here in Australia is broker introduced. So they love AI. And if you've got happy brokers, you've got someone choosing you over a competitor. And then you've also got happy, colleagues. You've got people in the processing centers, people as part of the system that haven't got a customer or a broker breathing down their neck for information, because AI is keeping everyone updated, making sure that any gaps in information are being filled and that notifications, etc., are sent. And then essentially leaving, as Mike beautifully described, the interaction moments, the great bits between someone in a process area and a customer, the broker and the customer, those moments of truth, the really, the high five moments, those are the interactions that can actually be had between humans, because AI is taking care of the difficult stuff and at the same time creating a really efficient process.
Building on that, I couldn't agree more, because I kind of don't think too much about cost. I think more about, if you have an efficient end-to-end customer journey, the cost kind of looks after itself. So again, a real example, our traditional journey of changing address before we put it into TSB Smart Agent would often involve customers writing into us or filling out a form. And the rejection rate could typically be around 50% because the information is not quite right. We have to write back to the customer, we ring the customer to get the right outcome. Since moving to TSB Smart Agent and using the AI engine to kind of manage it, our rejection rate is less than 1%. So that will obviously reduce costs, but the prime focus of that is a better customer experience. So you get that kind of wow moment for a customer every time. I've asked TSB to do something, it's been done perfectly. Why am I not happy? A customer doesn't care that we've had to spend time and money on an old model toing and froing it. What they care about is the customer experience and the right outcome.
So, Mike, I don't want to focus on it too much. Ross has brought up a couple of instances of how AI has affected people and helped people during the pandemic. I'm really interested to kind of see how maybe it's made things easier for customers to get from the front end to the back end of a financial institution when the branches are shut.
Yeah, I think when the pandemic first hit, it was a telling time for all of us, and I really felt that it was our strategy at TSB was, part of me thinks that we were lucky and part of me thinks we were geniuses, that we were on the verge of just, with the AI technology, Watson, Live Person, but also partnership with Adobe when it comes to digital forms, electronic signatures, and the Adobe Experience platform as well. And pretty much all we did at the start of the pandemic was to accelerate our strategy. So we went from 0 digital forms to numerous digital forms, and we've had 750,000 completed out by customers since the start of the pandemic, and it's now BAU. And what's interesting about things like digital forms is it's becoming more of a norm. When we help a customer to take a payment holiday on their loan because they're out of work or whatever else, there's a whole bunch of stuff we did at the start of the pandemic to enable customers to do it digitally, instantly through something like Adobe Forms, that we weren't the first organizations to present an Adobe form to a customer. Adobe's massive, and you see it across many different industries. So again, it's that familiarity of the process. It's not something that's unique to TSB. The offering is unique, but the tool itself was powerful. So like I said, in a short period of time, we stood up TSB Smart Agent. We went with the whole suite of Adobe Forms. Our branch network was closed for a while, but opened up quite quickly and has been pretty much open throughout the pandemic, with obviously certain branches being closed if we couldn't get enough people in for one reason or another. But we just found that we've almost come to a new norm now. A customer pre-pandemic could either log onto their mobile, their web, their internet bank, ring us or go into the branch. Now they can do digital forms. Now they can speak to TSB Smart Agent. We just improve that offering. Now, the other thing, again, I keep going on about this, even the Adobe Forms were only successful because how we plugged them into the human side of it as well. So it's one thing if a customer's taking a 3-month payment holiday on a mortgage, their personal loan, their credit card, but they're going to have to speak to a human being to really help them and reassure them through that. And that was front and center. That's where our branch network came in. Whether, we had branch staff working from home, so they were on telephone lines, in a matter of days. All of our telephony team were working from home as well, but they had all that connectivity together all in one place. And something you picked up earlier, Doug, that just what made it easier for us at TSB is we have a very modern banking platform. So we're incredibly blessed that we have this modern banking platform, and then for everything else, whether it be our financial support system or our car system, we just have one platform for one platform for cars. We don't have a proliferation of a legacy estate to worry about, and our core banking system is a modern banking system. So that's kind of really enabled us to move at pace as we move forward on some of this agenda.
Incredible, and yeah, it really does underpin the fact that technology can allow the culture of innovation to kind of change. And speaking of that, then Ross, looking at how technology can be utilised to kind of play a critical role for a bank, making sure that the IT department is kind of connected to everyone's vision. How can banks ensure that level of digital transformation is employed across the spectrum of the whole company?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was thinking, the role of the IT department in banks has changed phenomenally over the last few years. It's almost impossible to think of anyone's role in the bank now not having some sort of interaction point with technology or being impacted positively by them. So I think, for me, when I think about what's so important here, it does come down to capturing feedback and data from your customers and colleagues, particularly those that are customer facing, because they're so important, ensuring that everyone's on the same page. And I think part of that is a strategy which everyone can see solves for the problems which they face as a user of the technology, and that customers are informing them they're having. And one where everyone can agree that both the solution and the problem it solves for are the right ones to be focused on.
Yeah.
Now, just talking about, I think picking up on that as well. I think where technology and specifically AI, I think we're really helping going forward. I always think about 15 years ago when I worked for a previous bank. I remember going out to one of the branches and spending the day there. And I spent the morning in the banking hall, and the whole morning I noticed this one lady sitting behind a counter that was absolutely amazing. Everything a customer asked for, she knew how it worked, she knew how to support. She pretty much knew every customer as they walked in the door as well. And I was just blown away at how professional this lady was. And then the afternoon I went to sit with her behind the counter. So I pulled up a stool and sat over her shoulder. And the first thing I noticed was what the customer couldn't see behind the screen was about 300 Post-it notes on the wall of everything she has to remember.
Wow.
Now, I think where technology really comes in, and particularly AI, is if technology can do that, keep the partner and the customer on track from a regulatory point of view, and everything needs to be asked, and then allows the member of staff to engage on a human level with the customer. I think that's where it wins. And we have a few projects like that we're working on at the moment that let the technology do the hard work and let the human being do that engagement with the customer.
Yeah,
it's a really good point, Mike. We see some tension sometimes when we implement our Diva solution into processing centres, where colleagues that have done things a certain way for a long time don't necessarily want to work with the AI solution, and almost that cultural change for them is one where we have to talk about those benefits to the customer, because whilst they might be fearful of what the impact of AI may be for them personally, maybe with regards to their role, what these banking colleagues are very passionate about is helping customers. So being aware and bought into those benefits that AI will bring, and then highlighting what this will enable them to do for the customer becomes absolutely critical in making sure that you're not just providing a great solution, but you've actually got the buy-in of the colleagues that are going to be working with it so that it can be implemented really seamlessly. Because, one of the critical elements that we find is that being able to implement this solution really effectively into the people that are going to use it or interface with it is absolutely critical.
Yeah. And I think that's really kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of finding that balance between the human contact and also the artificial, the artificial intelligence carrying the heavy work, but allowing the human customer side to really flourish without having that kind of burden. Now, guys, this, as we brought up at the beginning of the panel session, this session kind of spans the globe. I'm really interested to hear from both your perspectives on how AI has been used in finance around the world in a particular region, and if it's been used more so in a particular way. I don't know if that's too much of a top-down question, but I don't know if there's any kind of anecdotes that you've seen. Ross, if I could kick off with you over in Australia, you know, how have you seen the financial institutions really kind of look to AI? Has the wake up call been these giant AML kind of fines? Has that been the final wake up?
I think it definitely has, from a risk and regulation perspective. But you know, if I open the paper at the moment, the Financial Review over here, or I look even on the news, you know, we're obsessed about our property over here in Australia. We've come out of COVID quite well, as you probably know, and what we've seen is house prices increased by 15% post-COVID. There's more home lending applications in the system than at any point in the last 10, 15 years. And many financial institutions are overwhelmed. And there is a lot of talk about, you know, three things. Firstly, the time to approval and why it's so long for some institutions, more than others. There's also talk about the stress of banking workers working in processing centres, because they've got so much pressure on them to help people, you know, get the property of their dreams. And then you've also got that customer pressure. You've got auction clearance rates that are high and house prices increasing by the day. So, you know, AI then becomes a really critical component of the home purchasing process. And we're seeing those financial institutions that have got AI within their process are able to get an approval to customers, but in 3 to 4 days. And there are some other really big banks over here being criticised because their approval timelines are about 23 to 24 days. So that's the quantum of difference. And, you know, if you're at the other end of that as the person wanting to buy the house of your dreams for your family, you know, that time difference is unacceptable. And we're really seeing a lot of focus and scrutiny on that in the media and in discussions with, you know, intermediaries associated with the bank. So it's a very hot topic over here at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I'm hearing from that, my dream of being able to afford a lovely house in Australia is slipping away. But if I can, it will be a lot quicker when I finally can be able to. And I think, you know, Ross, you've hit on a point that we haven't really discussed. And I don't know if we have time. Hopefully, we can kind of fit it in. If I throw to you, Mike, and look at how, you know, AI is removing a lot of stress on the internal systems as well, the internal design. You know, you mentioned you're looking at someone at one of your colleagues in a branch actually kind of interacting with a customer, but how does the design of AI actually impact you know, your own colleagues working on the internal side?
Yeah, look, I think we've definitely seen an impact of when we get the conversation right through TSB Smart Agent, you would get a reduction in phone calls or footfalls in the branch, which means we can spend more time with customers on those interactions and on transactions, as I mentioned previously. I think how we drive this forward is going to be key. As far as how the technology is and how the technology is growing, I mentioned at the start that, you know, we're not a large bank. We know our customers really well, and I like to think we're good at customer experience design. But I'm reliant on my partnership with IBM and LivePerson plus Cognizant and Infosys. These are the teams that rock up and say, right, we're going to widen your horizon view here, Mike, and you might want to think differently about this. But it's always, we start and end with the customer. But I think anything we can do that allows customers to interact in their channel of choice. So if I go back to that example of change of address in TSB Smart Agent, if you're a customer that every day you log onto the mobile app, you pay your bills, you move money, check your balance, and then you do move, and suddenly we're forcing you to go to a channel that you don't normally use. That's not a great experience. Right. But it also takes customer from a channel they don't normally use, from a channel they're familiar with, to one they don't normally use, and then have a good experience, but it might feel clunky to them because it's the first time they've had to punch in their long card number on a keypad or explain where they bought their pet food 3 weeks ago as they're going through ID&V. So by building it in their channel of choice, we are seeing a reduction in phone calls and footfall, but then we can reinvest that into some more value-add opportunities for our customers.
Incredible. So yeah, a circle that kind of keeps pushing the kind of operation side to be more efficient and cost efficient. So guys, I think we have come to time. Thank you so much for your insights. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear the very customer focused side from yourself, Mike, and also Ross from the kind of operation side and how these are, these knock-on effects are impacting every side of the bank. It's absolutely fascinating, and it's almost almost a shame that, as I mentioned at the beginning, it is almost considered science fiction, because you guys have both put in so much work into making it a reality. And so thank you so much for your insights, and also to our viewers as well. Thank you so much for watching. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I'll see you in the comments. Guys, thank you very much. It's been great seeing you, and I hope to see you again soon.